Hello, everybody. Today's episode of our HOTCAST is very special because of our exclusive guest from the United States. Let me introduce you Crawford del Prete, President of Market Intelligence and advisory company IDC. Welcome, Crawford.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Crawford, could you tell us a bit about yourself, your story, and your professional background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am currently the president of IDC. I've been in the role. I was appointed president by our board of directors last January. So January of 2019. So about 7 months into the role. I have been in and around the IT industry this is my 31st year. So I've been studying the industry for a long, long time. I actually joined IDC about 30 years ago, and I have had pretty much every role in the place. There were times when I was an associate consultant, I was a junior analyst, I covered what in those days were very, very interesting technologies. I actually started in the storage area, covering in many years ago. There were over 100 companies on this planet that made hard disk drives. And so I was one of the people who really studied all the componentry and how data was stored, studied the future of flash memory. I actually was one of the founders of our semiconductor research at IDC. And my journey has very much been understanding how enterprises and how systems are using data and are using technology. So ultimately, that led me to running our enterprise computing group, led me to running our applications group, our services group, eventually our industry group. And as the industry consolidated and as we sort of looked to see the interconnectedness of technology across all these different domains, I ended up about 12 years ago becoming our second chief research officer. So in charge of setting the research agenda for IDC worldwide. And that's a job that I really cherished, and it was fantastic to travel all around the world and understand how technology was beginning. And we started to see it. We started to see that trend really starting in about 2007, how technology was starting to change not only horizontal practices, but how it was starting to change vertical practices within industries. And so I consider myself super, super lucky that I get to wake up every day and see how technology is changing the world and be at the front lines of how interesting companies are using technology in new ways. And so I'm very, very grateful. I joined IDC working in financial services into a supplier to the financial services space. And, while that was interesting, it's really nothing compared to studying technology.
Yes, I think the storage industry is a great example because, they went through the great transformation and disruption, right? So you watched that closely? Yeah.
So I watched the storage industry. As a matter of fact, in the storage industry, I got to know some very famous people in the storage industry. I don't know if you know the book, The Innovator's Dilemma.
Yeah, of course.
Clayton Christensen.
That's why I'm asking because.
So a very interesting story about the Innovator's Dilemma. So I was one of the leading analysts studying the hard disk drive marketplace. And I would travel all around Silicon Valley, meeting with the CEOs of all these hard disk drive companies. And they kept saying to me, you need to meet this guy from Harvard. He's writing a book studying what happens in this industry because he uses the disk drive as an example. So this was early. This is 1990. This must be 1995, 1996. So I bought the book. I read the book. I said, oh, it's interesting. So on the back of the book, it had his email address. So I sat down, I wrote him, I said, hi, Clayton, my name is Crawford. I enjoyed your book. We should talk sometime. The next morning, I got an email back from him saying, it's funny, I keep going around to all these disk drive companies and they keep saying, you should talk to this guy, Crawford. So I went down to Harvard. We became very good friends. IDC actually did a partnership within a site, and I was actually acknowledged as a person who gave input into his second book, The Innovator Solution. And then I reviewed on the back his third book, which was The Innovator's Prescription. So it was really, really fun to work with him. We did a partnership with his consulting company, studying disruptive innovation in a number of different areas. So, it's a disruptive innovation, the jobs to be done theory, outcomes-based research, all really foundational to a lot of the stuff I brought to being chief research officer here at IDC.
Brilliant.
Yeah, really fun.
I find your research background very interesting because most CEOs I talk to come from business roles, usually. In the world of technology, do you consider this an advantage?
I do in some ways. I mean, I feel like my career has very much been focused, always with, two paths. And I tried to stay on these two paths. One is one of being a student of the industry and really understanding how the industry, and I like to think of myself as a sponge, always soaking up all this interesting information and then trying to figure out how, as a new leader, we can use that information at IDC to make our company better. And I'm working very, very hard to try to take the best of that and use it at IDC to create, as I talk about a lot in different forums, the best information services firm on the planet. Mm-hmm. And working with my team every single day to create a fantastic future-looking information services group. But the way in my mind that you learn about that is that you're always a student, always learning. The day I stop learning is the day I don't want to do this anymore. And that's what gets me excited and what I want to do every day. So I think it helps to answer your question.
We will be talking about barriers to innovations, and I think the fact that management team do not understand technology can sometimes be a big barrier. However, I also see a change in leadership mentality and a shift from, let's say, know-it-all to learn-it-all attitude, which I believe is a great approach that everybody should understand and adopt.
Yeah, you can't possibly know it. And I find that the people that are intimidated by technology are the ones that are the most difficult to work with because they don't want to look at it. They don't want to, they're intimidated, and then therefore they're intimidated by the people that know about it. It's the people that maybe don't understand it, but know what they don't know and are willing to seek another opinion, are willing to bring people in, and are willing to open up their mind a little bit and just use very, very simple frameworks to say, does this make sense? Does that make sense? Is this going to help me in a new way? Is this not going to help me in a new way? But then get into leave the technology details to people that, really, those are the people that I think can really make a substantial difference in the organization. Intimidation is your enemy in this journey.
When we do leadership workshops, I sometimes ask leaders what they want to learn. For example, what do you want to learn next year or in 3 years? And sometimes they really look intimidated. And I feel that they think that our people need to change, our people need to learn, but not us.
Yeah, and I will be in a stuffed shirt here, and I will sit here, and I will look important. And no, you gotta embrace, but you gotta embrace what you don't know, and it's okay. You're not going to learn the details. It's the conceptually is I think what you want to try to get a handle on.
Is it something? And I would like to talk more about the IDC and your role. Is this something that you consider as your mission? To help your customers understand technology and the leaders of the organization to embrace it? So,
absolutely. Look, what we want to do here at IDC every single day is use our people and our data and our analytics to help customers make better, decisions around technology, to have better outcomes around technology, to make our customers more successful every single day. That's what we do, and we want to create new kinds of database products, data-based products. That is not. We'll leave the databases to Oracle. we again. So using our people, our data, and our analytics to allow customers to make the best decisions as possible. And when we think about from a vision standpoint, when we want to really push our employees, it's really about, how do we change the way the world thinks about technology and about, and the impact of technology on business and society. And it's a lofty goal, but if we do this right at IDC, we don't just want to be an interpreter. We want to study and create products that change the way people think. I mean, poor my associate Jan Saruki here has heard me talk over and over. We are living in a wonderful time. This is an amazing time that we're living in. This time when technology is changing every aspect of industry, and we will look back on this time and marvel at all the progress that we made. IDC wants to be the company that really opened your eyes and made you think differently about that impact of technology on your business and on greater society. And I do use it every single day. And my goal is to inspire our customers, starters, our team members, who will then inspire our customers, who will then help change the world. I mean, that's really why we're here.
Have you noticed any change in your customers' needs? I mean, technology is constantly changing and evolving, so the information you provide them is more and more important. But how has your relationship with customers changed in time?
Yeah. So, our company is over 50 years old, right? And what I love about this company is that we have constantly been changing and evolving the products that we develop and the ways that we focus on meeting the needs of our customers. The thing that's interesting is that the customer need, while it becomes more sophisticated, it doesn't really change. What our customers are looking for, whether it be a technology buyer, whether it be a technology supplier, or whether it be a technology watcher, so a company like a financial services company or a large media company, what they're interested in is an informed, data-based outside opinion to help them make the best possible decision as possible. They're looking for someone who is open-minded, someone who is bringing in perspectives from all different aspects of the world and all the different senses, and helping them make the best possible decision around their future technology decision. So if you're a technology buyer, it's everything from how do I evaluate the landscape to how do I make sure I'm doing something that is going to be sort of benchmark myself with other companies in my group to how do I make the right technology purchase decision. If I'm a technology vendor, it's how am I doing? So, something as simple as market share to what do my customers want? What do they want in the future? How do I make sure that my products are competitive with what my customers are looking for, to how do I attract more customers? Well, what's a way for me to grow my business? And so, has the relationship changed? I would say that the relationship changes when we stay relevant and we stay on those points. So when the relationship, and one of the things that I always say to analysts is you must be relevant in this industry. You must understand the current trends. You must understand what customers want and what they're buying. And you must be out there communicating about it every day. You must be communicating about it in your research. You must be communicating about it in social media. You must be communicating about it in your interactions in the media and with customers. Because if you're not talking about it, you don't exist. The days of just sort of writing and then publishing to a document, those days are gone. We have to be relevant. And if you're not relevant, you got a real challenge. So how has our relationship changed? It's changed in that I'm striving to make our analysts more relevant, which means that they become more of an advisor and a trusted advisor to all the different kinds of customers that we have over time. But that thirst for information, it's always been there in different forms.
Why am I asking? Well, 30 or 50 years ago, there was no internet. And access to information was limited. Nowadays, a lot of information is available to everybody, but there are two sides to the story. On the one hand, I can look up all the information I want. I can see what technologies are used anywhere in the world in 2 minutes. But on the other hand, and that's kind of a dark side, if you will, is that there is too much information. So with the availability of information, is it the trust or something else that helps leaders to take decisions?
Yeah, I think it's complicated. There's an element of trust. There's an element of perspective. There's an element of how do I try and really sort through all this information and zero in on bringing you an outside perspective to say, focus here, focus on this area, because there's no filter on the internet. It all just kind of comes at you. And so it's very difficult to sort of separate what's important from what's not important. So if we can provide that level of guidance into the signals that will help you make the right decision, then that's really valuable. And that value of an outside opinion. So I'll give you a more tangible example. As chief research officer, we were always focused on everyone always comes to us and has all kinds of different ideas for different sets of data that IDC should incorporate into our company, because we're called IDC, International Data Corporation. So you must be interested in large amounts of data. But what I've realized as Chief Research Officer, as Chief Operating Officer, and now as President is that IDC is in the data business, but we're really in the precious data business. We're really we're not in the big data business. We're in the business of creating data from multiple sensors, from multiple sources that you cannot get anywhere else. You cannot Google it. You cannot find it on Ali Cloud. You cannot find it in these places. And it's very, very precious because it is something that you can use to make critical decisions. So as we create data, I've been thinking a lot about and publishing with my senior leadership team sort of, principles that we run the company by. And one of those principles is that data is plentiful, but precious data is scarce. Yes. And we focus on that precious data here at IDC. And I think that precious data turns into precious, measured, and valuable opinion. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we really want to focus in on our customers, because you can get the internet to tell you anything you want it to tell you, anything you want it to tell you. But having a trusted advisor with an outside perspective that's data-based, that's that.
Do you also help your customers to connect the two worlds? I mean, IT and business? Because I think this is another big barrier, right? The technology vendors don't understand the business of their customers. I give our clients, people from business, a little exercise. I give them a list of few websites of different startups and apps. And when they look at them, they have no idea as to what the given technology does and how it could help them. Do you think that the lack of understanding and growing divergence between the IT of business is a real issue?
It's a huge issue. So about 15 years ago, give or take, IDC believed that technology. So if I take a step back, we strongly believe that technology would start to permeate different aspects of business in industry. So the way it started was that technology started to address horizontal functions within the enterprise. So we started to have Salesforce automation products. We started to have CRM products. We started to have HCM products. And obviously, you had collaboration products, and you had ways that people could do different horizontal functions within the organization. But then we started to see about 15 years ago that technology could be used, off-the-shelf technology could be used to drive down into a specific vertical market. So we made a bet and started acquiring companies. We acquired a company in the financial services space. We acquired a company in the energy space. We hired a number of people in the manufacturing and retail space. And we ended up across 6 different vertical industries. So financial services, healthcare, energy, manufacturing, retail, and government. We built out industry practices all over the world, and we called them insights. So IDC's manufacturing insights and health industry insights and financial insights. And this is long before digital transformation was embryonic. It wasn't even in the crib yet. It wasn't even a baby. It wasn't
a buzzword.
Yeah, it wasn't a buzzword then. This is long before digital transformation. And we built out these practices because we believed there would be an interesting intersection of industry and tech. Mm-hmm. And so now here we are 15, 20 years later, and we have, I believe, the preeminent footprint in understanding, and this is one of our fastest growing areas, is really understanding how technology is changing all these different industries and how it's transforming experiences, not just horizontally, but I can now take off-the-shelf technology and I can create a new payments platform with something like Square. Mm-hmm. I can take off-the-shelf a way to accept payments. I can take off-the-shelf technology and with agile development, and I can create, all kinds of services. And now with microservices and containers, I can spin up technologies. So here's a fun fact for you, right? Between 1964 and 2015, we estimate that about 500 million applications were developed. Okay?
500 million.
Okay. We believe that from 2015 to 2022, another 500 million will be created. How is that? Because we have code bases like GitHub, because we can reuse code, because we have things like microservices where we can spin up new services on existing code super, super rapidly with things like agile processes. So what does that say? That says that we're innovating at this rapid, rapid pace. That means you can take off-the-shelf technology and you can transform the healthcare experience, or you can transform the manufacturing experience. These walls are all coming down rapidly. So it's a long answer to absolutely. That's why we made this bet 15 years ago and why we're growing so rapidly right now.
Yeah. And I also think nowadays every department, no matter if it's HR, sales, or finance, needs their own digital innovations, which also boost the need for new technologies. I would like to talk about something you call multiplied innovation. Could you please explain to our listeners what you mean by that?
So when we look at multiplied innovation, what we see is that it is sort of the second chapter of this era that we call the third platform. So just to unpack that a little bit, we saw that starting in about with the announcement of the PC, so early 80s, right? We saw the PC came out and we saw this client-server era was born. This was before the internet, this was before browsers, before everything else. We saw this client-server era was born. And it was basically this idea that you could have a client, you had all this data on the client, you wanted to be able to share that data across clients. So what we saw, though, was that between the early 1980s, let's call it 1983, 1981, and 2007, we had this huge PC client-server era. But then in 2007, there was a break. And in 2007, something amazing happened. Four things happened, right? We saw that Amazon, with elastic computing, started to get to scale. We saw big data and analytics move from the big Teradata platforms down into the departmental level, and we started to see products like Tableau being able to represent data and present data in new ways. We saw that Facebook changed from a .edu to a .com, and we saw that Twitter started to scale. And the fourth thing we saw happen in 2007 was we saw the iPhone. It was announced. And when those four things happened, we saw this emergence of the third platform where massive developer interest moved from the client-server era to this third platform era. But just like on the third platform, it's not like we went from the personal computer came out in 1981, and then in 2007, we were still just using the personal computer. There were all these milestones along the way. Milestones along the way were things like Mosaic with a browser. We saw Cisco wire the earth and connect people with Ethernet. We saw 802.11 and Wi-Fi really change the way we could have high bandwidth wireless communications. There were all these moments on the second platform of innovation that were hugely, I mean, it allowed, Wi-Fi enabled you to have a mobile computer, right? A connected mobile computer. You had them before, but now all of a sudden you could be in a coffee shop, you can do anything you want. So we viewed that on the third platform, in the era of the third platform, the period from 2007 to 2015 was kind of this period of experimentation. We saw developers flock to the third platform, but we saw sort of these two worlds lived side by side. So you saw, and I'm sure you heard this, Philip, in talking to customer. You saw, yes, I'm using the cloud, but really I'm just experimenting with the cloud. Most of my real development is still done in my data center. And we had these big debates about, will you ever be able to have business applications on the iPhone? Will you, the big idea of BYOD, bring your own device, these were big things that people struggled with, right? And so the area of experimentation kind of happened for, about 7-8 years. But what we see now in this period of multiplied innovation is kind of the next chapter of the third platform, where we're seeing this era of massive innovation. We're seeing this era where now we have a steady set of developers that have built out all these applications, and now we can start spinning up new services. And we're seeing it in real time. We're seeing new services being spun up all over the world. And the biggest example of that is AI. AI is something that, 5 years ago, we didn't talk a lot about AI. Now, if you're not talking about AI and you're trying to raise money, you're probably not going to raise money.
There should be AI anywhere in the bug points.
And in a few years, AI is going to be like sugar. It's an ingredient. Yeah. It's an ingredient in many different things that you make. But it's not just about AI. It's just something that, everything will have an element of AI. We see IoT as another area where we're seeing massive amounts of innovation being spun up as we merge, SCADA systems with traditional IT. We're seeing blockchain. Blockchain is a fascinating technology in the era of multiplied innovation because it's allowing us to have a greater level of trust with a distributed ledger platform, but it's happening in plain sight. You don't necessarily see the blockchain. Yeah. It's just that the blockchain enables more trusted transactions. And then, of course, security is going to continue to be something that we'll struggle with as security problems become more and more complicated. But I think this era of multiplied innovation, this is the era where we spin up our next 500 million applications. This is the era where companies really, they create so many different services. And I think what's going to have to happen is we're going to need AI in the next era, the next chapter of the third platform, which we call autonomous systems, where things become, because we're going to need artificial intelligence and autonomy in order to make sense out of all the data we're creating with these many platforms and communities and new services that are being created in this era of multiplied innovation. So I view this period from 2017 to 2023, 2025, as this period of explosion, where we're going to see many services. And then there'll be a period of consolidation. And we're already seeing some of that consolidation, whether that's, what we just saw, recently with the Tableau deal, or whether that's, what we saw with IBM and Red Hat. I mean, we're seeing consolidation already starting.
And how does multiplied innovation impact on companies, especially traditional organizations? What happens when their competitors start to use multiplied innovation in order to scale much faster?
Well, I mean, what happens is that you start seeing disruption happening all around you. You start seeing disruption happening in, if you're a bank, it could happen in certain parts of the lending business. It could happen in certain parts of the mortgage business, where you get these small disruptors that can kind of come up. If you're a taxi cab company, it can be autonomous, not autonomous, but it could be ride sharing. And so all of a sudden you've got this ability to, and then that quickly spreads, right? So it spreads from ride sharing to, small package delivery to restaurants, delivering, food. And now it's turning into something that's disrupting the entire logistics market. So this ability of multiplied innovation means that every company is becoming a technology company, and every company is, and the idea that I have a unassailable moat around me, is foolish. I mean, companies, you can disrupt so many different, kinds of businesses, going forward. And we're seeing it in multiple places. And I think that, what we're seeing right now is that the businesses that are less regulated, those industries tend to be more ripe for disruption, whereas the more heavily regulated industries, things like healthcare, those are ones that are going to take, a little bit longer. And I think that we're going to have sort of this tense relationship with regulation because citizens are going to see in the less regulated industries, hey, I can get these wonderful services that are available to me, but why can't I get them in a more regulated kind of industry? So I think those industries will topple in the second half of this era of multiplied innovation. But really, it's hard for me to visualize an industry that can't be disrupted right now. I mean, we're seeing it in over-the-top video, and everybody thought cable TV couldn't be disrupted. Now we're seeing people are buying their video over the top and over the cable. We're seeing it in hardware businesses where software-defined allows you to basically, define a piece of hardware to basically do many different functions across the enterprise. We're seeing it in banking. We're seeing it in logistics. We're seeing it in multiple industries.
What advice would you give me if I were a CEO of a traditional organization? What should I do in order to really embrace technology, not only talk about it, and to use all data and knowledge we have from multiplied innovation?
Yeah. So what I would advise CEOs to do is, well, for starters, embrace change. I mean, and again, the technology is the relatively easy part, the hard part of the people. The hard part is the culture. The hard part is getting people to embrace technology and embrace new kinds of processes. Always remember as a CEO that end user needs that you have, the end user needs your customers have, those tend not to change. What change is the way that your customers' needs are served. And if you don't serve your customers' needs in an efficient way, one of your competitors will. So embrace change. Think about how you're developing your services, the cadence for how fast you can develop those services, and then try to create agile processes, try to create new development processes to be embracing change and delivering new services to your customer at a faster cadence. And I'll give you a very tangible example. I look back at the days of ERP systems and I look back at the days of software. And it's interesting to say that if I look at old CRM systems that you used to buy as licenses, and I used to talk to customers, you look at the ERP systems, do you know how many versions would come out in a given year? The answer is maybe one. Maybe one every other year would come out. And then I always ask the question to the audience, does anyone know when the last version of Salesforce came out? The answer is nobody raises their hands. And I always say the same thing, this morning. Because Salesforce comes out with new beta features every single day. They're in constant beta. They're in constant development mode. They're bringing these products out. And customers are happy with this notion of perpetual beta. And I think that what CEOs need to get comfortable with is this notion of perpetual beta. This notion of, I'm going to co-collaborate with you as a customer. I'm going to work with you. We're going to test things out. And if they don't work, we will change it. We will try to figure out ways to be more agile. And to meet your needs. I promise you as a CEO, if women and men who are running companies don't embrace this change, the boards will ultimately find people who will embrace change, because we are just moving too quickly, in order to not be able to do that. And I think you also have to create a work environment. We have to be able to create a work environment that is that represents the future, that represents using modern tools. It's not just about free coffee and free food and it's about a culture that drives innovation. It's about a culture that allows people to work together in new ways and to bring teams from different disciplines across the organization together to discuss problems and to not necessarily be siloed working away. So I would say look across your organization. I would say try to figure out how to embrace the change. I would say perpetual beta for your products is a good thing, within reason. Obviously, there's safety and issues you have to think about. And the last thing I would say is be data-driven. You have to be a data-driven organization. You have to be able to collect data, look and build a structure where you can really try to understand, am I improving? Because if you're improving things like net promoter scores, things like, minutes on the call, on a help call, things like, days to order fulfillment, or minutes to order fulfillment, all those kinds of things, those things will translate into profit. The profit is the trailing indicator. Being data-driven will ultimately get you to revenue growth and profit.
Okay, great. I always ask my guests about their relation to technology. So could you share with us what are your favorite apps or digital services?
Yeah. Me and technology. Yeah.
So, what are your favorite apps or digital services? What do you use?
Yeah. So I'm I like to play. I like to play with technology. So, for me, some of the favorite stuff that I work on is, I'm trying to think. Favorite thing. So I fool around a lot with home automation. I'm very, very interested in the ability to connect things like Amazon Alexa and Google Home to different features in my house. So I like to experiment with things like Casa, which is a TP-Link app that allows me to control home automation in homes around my home around the world. I fool around a lot with Wemo, which is owned by the guys at Foxconn, which is also another home automation app. Obviously, I use all the the other same apps around, whether it be ride sharing, whether it be, restaurant review, all that kind of stuff. But I really, really am spending a lot of time on sort of the IoT and the home automation space. I'm also very, very interested in kind of the future of how you can use that virtualization layer to sort of virtualize and create software-defined devices. So I've created taking stuff in my house and creating a virtual layer and creating a virtual home server, building a virtual home server, but more just to really understand sort of how some of that technology kind of works, because I'm just really super interested.
Yeah. And I think this is really important because some people work with technologies having the attitude of I need to learn, but you said you like to play, and I think this is a crucial element of the whole innovation process, that people start to play with technology, even if they are CEOs of a huge multinational corporation. And not only CEOs, I think we all need to start to play. Crawford, thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your stay here in Prague.